We begin with breaking news out of Argentina. That's where the family of the disappeared activist Santiago Maldonado has confirmed that the body found in the Chubut River is his. Forensic experts have been conducting an autopsy on the body at the judicial morgue in Buenos Aires. Santiago's brother said the tattoos and other marks on the body left no doubt to his identity. The body had been taken to the capital after being found by Navy divers on Tuesday. Santiago Maldonado disappeared on August 1st when the police mounted a violent raid on a Mapuche indigenous community protesting over their land rights. We will bring you more information on this breaking news story as we get it. The Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gastone Browne, has been speaking out about his country's vision as it moves towards recovery after the devastation caused by Hurricane Irma. Browne was addressing the Global Citizen Forum taking place in Montenegro.
So it means going forward that Barbuda will have a more robust building code, one in which we construct public infrastructure, public buildings and private properties that could sustain winds in excess of 250 miles per hour. That in itself is an opportunity. It is also an opportunity to make Barbuda the first totally green and organic island in the world.
UNICEF says that some 39,000 affected children are in need of assistance in Hurricane Irma and Maria affected countries. According to its Eastern Caribbean Humanitarian Situation reports, more than a quarter of these children are under the age of 5. The report also states that although authorities from these Caribbean islands have made significant progress in restoring services to children, many of them are still in need of protection, education, and other critical services. Let's look at some of the main points raised by UNICEF. Only 14,000 children from Anguilla, Barbuda, and the Turks and Caicos Islands are able to attend schools equipped with pedagogical and recreational materials. The organization needs over $8.5 million, and they only have 52% of that goal. They need another 48% of their funding requirements. And the total number of persons at risk in hurricane-affected Anguilla, Barbuda, the British Virgin Islands, and the Turks and Caicos is over 143,000 people. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been attending the local swearing-in of socialist governors elected last weekend in the state of Carabobo. He said that the United States has no moral authority to promote intervention in Venezuela.
I have the numbers here. In Carabobo, 59.9% of the electorate took part. In the United States, barely 50% take part. So what can the U.S. government say about our democracy? They have no authority to comment. We will not accept the interventionist attitude of the United States in matters that correspond exclusively to the Venezuelan people.
The scale of the victory for the Chavistas in the regional elections surprised many observers. So what was it based on? Our team in Caracas have been looking into the possible reasons in this report.
18 of 23 governorships are now decorated with PSUV colours after last Sunday's regional elections. With a historic turnout of 61%, the candidates of the GPP, the socialist-led coalition, won more than 5,200,000 votes, or 53.65% of the total. The question now is why Chavismo won.
Why has Chavismo won? Because it's rooted in the people, because it has a genuine connection with people's needs, with their reality. This is a connection that opinion polls cannot perceive.
The truth is, there is not one single reason for this victory, and it will be simplistic to say that Chavismo won just because the opposition, divided in what it says and does, lost votes and support. To understand this victory, analysts say it's necessary to understand Chavismo as a form of identity, as a factor of cohesion in a society that is organized and aware that Venezuela is at war. A war without bombs, but a war all the same.
Because there's an economic war and a psychological operation that the revolution and our people are defeating. This is what is becoming clear.
The sanctions imposed by the United States are part of this war that Venezuela is suffering, which suffocates it and prevents it importing food or medicine. It combines with the inflation and the international media coverage with its talk of dictatorship in a country where there are elections on average every 11 months.
Chavismo has been able to pull together the expectations, complaints and identities that were denied throughout Venezuelan history.
Chavismo also ensures stability at moments of crisis, with the social missions, the food support, the price controls on basic products. These create an essential awareness when people come to vote. On the other hand, we cannot forget the last violent months in Venezuela, promoted by the right-wing opposition with the so-called guarimbas. This violence ended suddenly thanks to the election of the National Constituent Assembly.
Sunday's results, the stabilization of the political landscape, the channeling of social conflict into legal and electoral paths, show that this was the right decision on the Constituent Assembly to check the social polarization that exists today.
The National Constituent Assembly has given new life to the members and grassroots organizations of the Chavistas. It also demobilized and divided the opposition, whose followers accused their leaders of not having achieved their goals. This led to widespread abstention by the right in these elections now seen as historic and decisive for the future of Venezuela.
Our correspondent Reagan Devines joins us live from Caracas. Good afternoon, Reagan. How are you? So my opening question is, what is the current state of Venezuela's opposition?
Yes, you're all right, President Nicolas Maduro.
Sorry, what I was going to ask you is, what is the current state of Venezuela's opposition?
Well,
as Chavismo keeps showing its strength. Did you hear me?
Yeah, Chavismo is showing its, yes, I'm hearing you. Chavismo is showing its strength. President Maduro has been to 4 states thus far supporting members of the PSUV that won their governorships. Yesterday he was in Miranda and Carabobo. Today he visited Lara and Barinas. In Barinas he visited a crowd who was supporting Argenis Chavez, brother of former leader Hugo Chavez, who won his votes by 52%. And there he denounced U.S. Rhetoric against Venezuela that was stating that Venezuela's elections were a fraud. This is what he said. He said, quote, "The U.S. not only insults the Venezuelan people and their democratic and peaceful conviction, but they intend to achieve through force what their local subordinates have been unable to achieve through the popular vote," local subordinates being the opposition. Yesterday, the opposition, Venezuelan opposition, met. Most of the parties met together in the National Assembly building, and they came to consensus. They made a decree that they are decrying the local elections, the local regional elections this past Sunday as fraud, and they're asking for an independent international audit and an independent electoral council. And they also want more evidence they want evidence to be collected to support these claims of fraud. As we've been saying as well this week, the opposition is not all in agreement. There are close to 20 different groups that make up the MUD coalition, and they are not all on the same page here. Some of the newer members of the MUD coalition, the younger, more energetic members, they want Maduro out. They want him out by all means necessary, and they were the ones who were seen walking side by side with the guarimbas between the months of April and July, those 4 months from April, where we saw some 120 plus deaths in the streets. And so on another side of the opposition camp are saying, listen, these past regional elections, we saw no evidence of fraud. We believe the results are valid, and we do not support your call back to the streets and back to violence. We do not support it, and we want no part of it whatsoever. So the opposition camp, as we've been saying, is in total disarray at this point in time, where they can't agree on much. But we'll see come next week what exactly will come out of their camps, Sony.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Reagan. I mean, you're really trying to give us some clarity on the very confusing situation with the Venezuelan opposition. So that was Reagan Devines reporting live in Caracas. We have more news in a minute, so stay with us. We begin in Colombia, where President Juan Manuel Santos has announced a comprehensive intervention in Tumaco, the scene of violence in recent weeks. The intervention includes the creation of a joint task force made up of members of the Army, Navy, Air Force and police. Santos said that the forces deploying to Tumaco will include 4,000 members of the armed forces and 2,500 police officers. There have been several violent incidents in the region in recent weeks, including the killing of social leaders such as Jose Jare Cortez and the massacre of 7 coca farmers. More than 120 social leaders have been killed in Colombia this year alone, putting the country's peace process in question. We have more in this report.
While the national government breaches the peace deal, we are being killed. With that severe sentence, campesinos and social leaders called for an indefinite national strike, beginning on October 23rd.
The national government is breaching the agreements of the voluntary substitution of illicit crop cultivation, and they are imposing the violent eradication. It continues with the violation of human rights and the murder of social leaders, especially by paramilitary groups and the police.
The current picture in Colombia cannot be more bleak. During the last week, 13 people were killed in different territories. Among them are 6 former FARC guerrillas, 2 indigenous people, 4 social leaders, and a rural school teacher.
What we really want is for the government to fulfill the Havana Agreement and respect us and the campesinos leaders. They need to respect our lives and give us guarantees to continue on with the process that we lead today.
Among those lives which were snatched away by the violence was Patricia Castano. In these pictures that were filmed only a month and a half ago in Medellin, we can see Patricia wearing the white shirt. She was a victim of the armed conflict, and she was a social leader and a human rights defender. And it was here where she resisted the paramilitary violence and the mafias that still control the poor areas of Medellin. More than 120 social leaders have been killed so far in this year. And that's not the only type of violence that is inflicted on the Colombian people. The campesinos are still stigmatized, criminalized, and persecuted by the Colombian state. That's the reason why the coca, marijuana, and poppy growers are also going to take to the streets across the entire country to demand that the government fulfill the peace deal.
If shooting campesinos could solve the problem, it would have been solved a long time ago. If fumigation could solve the problem would already be fixed. But the numbers and the facts proves that this approach of criminal persecution against campesinos has failed. And that is why the Havana deal is very important. And it's key, because it's working by recognizing the human rights of the campesinos.
This is the forgotten Colombia, the one that is continuing to struggle with the effects of the armed conflict. People are still burying their dead. In the midst of the violence, they start to prepare for the national mobilization, a claim for peace, dignity, and respect for the living.
In Argentina, the imprisoned indigenous activist Milagro Sala harmed herself in a desperate move after authorities denied her the right to be transferred to a private clinic. The leader of the Tumaco Amaru movement, who has been in jail since January 2016, is suffering from several health issues. She was treated by prison medical staff and given stitches after she broke a window and cut her arm. Our correspondent in Argentina has the details of this case.
We're experiencing a lot of tension in the Jujuy province in Argentina after Milagro Sala injured herself last night. She did this after 4 members of the courthouse ruled by Isidoro Cruz went to the jail to notify Sala that her petition to be transferred to a private clinic was rejected.
This petition was introduced by Sala's defense lawyer on October 11. After receiving the news, the activist went back to her cell and, in a clear act of desperation, she broke a glass window and cut her arm. She got attention from the staff and then was treated by the jail's surgeon, who gave her 9 stitches. Let's remember that until last week she was under house arrest, until October 14, when she was suddenly taken away in her pajamas in a very violent operation that brought her back to jail. Milagros Sala suffers from severe depression. This is certified by the medical staff of the court. Her case has had several irregularities, including the lack of information available for the prisoner and her lawyers. Right now, she remains stable. She was able to meet with her lawyer after the medical treatment and also received a visit from her husband for a few minutes. On Saturday, she expects to have regular visits again. On October the 25th, there will be a meeting of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights to discuss the case. We now go back to the studio.
17 campesino families in Honduras have been evicted from their homes. One member of the Casablanca community was shot in the leg during the violent destruction of the homes. Telesur's correspondent in Honduras, Gilda Silva-Strucci, has tweeted, Honduras, a new eviction in La Paz leaves 1 person wounded and 17 families homeless. Honduras has seen many evictions of farmers demanding their right to their land. The violent police operations against Chile's Mapuche people have suffered a serious setback. The Supreme Court has decreed the immediate release of the people accused in Operation Hurricane, ruling that their preventive detention violates a basic human right, the presumption of innocence and due process.
An ironic coincidence. Just when the Supreme Court declared without effect the court decision that imprisoned irregularly 8 Mapuche comuneros, the Chilean Chancellor, Heraldo Muñoz, received a group of self-proclaimed Venezuelan judges and criticized the government and its justice system.
As the national anthem says, Chile is a refuge from oppression.
The paradox is that while the Chilean justice tries to repair the unfair and arbitrary actions of the government, the Chilean government sets itself up as a referee in America, and particularly on Venezuela. I think that today we learned a big lesson. We got to worry about what's happening at home before we start criticizing what's happening abroad.
The so-called Operation Hurricane is unprecedented. A hunt against several Mapuche leaders who on September the 7th were taken into preventative detention, accused of illicit terrorist association.
This is a farce. That's really clear. It's political persecution. They violate their own laws and have ignored all the guarantees of due process.
Violent arrests, with no warrant and no concrete incriminating evidence against the accused. Only text messages, without names or telephone numbers attached.
The judge should look after the most vulnerable, in this case the accused. The judge has to respect their rights and guarantees as recognized in the Constitution and international agreements, but she didn't do her job.
That's why the Supreme Court was very clear in accepting the habeas corpus appeal presented by the defense. It considered that there wasn't enough evidence to support the Mapuche's imprisonment.
That's why the precautionary measures expired, and for the same reason, they ordered the immediate release of the people who were in preventive prison.
A sentence without foundation is an illegitimate sentence. It is illegal and arbitrary, and that's the correction that the criminal chamber of the Supreme Court has made.
Héctor Yautul, one of the Mapuche political prisoners released, spoke with Telesur.
With huge joy, because this means we are obtaining our freedom. What we would like to highlight is a powerful signal that the Supreme Court is sending on how they approach a conflict that has a political and historical character, because it has criminalized the struggle of our people.
The investigation will continue, but it now presumes the innocence of those who never should have been in prison.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Spain's Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has confirmed that he will go ahead with measures to suspend Catalonia's autonomy. On Saturday, Rajoy is expected to announce the measures that will impose Madrid's direct rule over Catalonia based on Article 155 of Spain's constitution. He said these will have the backing of Spain's opposition Socialist Party, which says it has agreed to hold regional elections in Catalonia in January 2018.
I am in agreement with the Socialist Party because we have reached an agreement. Therefore, the measures I'm going to present tomorrow will be in agreement with the People's Party, the Socialist Party, Ciudadanos and the government. Each of them can describe them as they deem it convenient. The only thing I want to say now is that the main goal of those measures is to go back to legality, because there cannot be a part of the country where the law is not applied, where the law doesn't exist. At the same time, we need to go back to institutional normality.
The fourth day of the Chinese Communist Party's 19th Congress is about to get underway. It's the country's most important political event ever. So what did we learn from the third day of the party's Congress? For starters, the party chief confirmed plans to set up a free trade port in Shanghai that will be in line with the central government's guidelines. The aim of the free trade port is to ease restrictions for incoming cargo. Another major task for Shanghai is to accelerate the development of a scientific innovation center with global influence. Now for a roundup of the other news making headlines around the world.
Kurdish Peshmerga fighters retaliated to Iraqi gains in the Kirkuk province with gunfire as much of the region has fallen back into the hands of Baghdad. The brief resistance comes as Iraqi security forces take back much of the territory once held by the Kurds in a move prompted by Baghdad following the Kurdish independence referendum vote held back in September. Iraqi soldiers have claimed back much of Kirkuk's lucrative oil fields, which Kurdish forces have held since 2014. The offensive was called by Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, who strongly opposed the independence referendum, where 93% voted yes for autonomy from Iraq. The Syrian Democratic Forces claimed an official victory over the Islamic State group in Raqqa during a ceremony in the former de facto ISIS capital. After a long drawn-out offensive that began in June, the SDF raised their flags on Tuesday in the city after clearing out the last remaining pockets of ISIS fighters. After sweeping across much of Iraq back in 2014, ISIS began fortifying the Syrian city in 2015. Since then, much of their logistical planning was centered in the city. Kenya's incumbent president Uhuru Kenyatta urged Kenyans to come out and vote in the highly contentious presidential election rerun scheduled for October 26.
Hatuwezi kuishi in what is called a permanent state of elections. Our economy needs to move on, and we must rid this nation of that uncertainty. And it is indeed my appeal to every Kenyan: exercise your democratic right on the 26th of October.
Kenyatta's victory in August was annulled due to irregularities, prompting a rescheduled election. The opposition leader, Raila Odinga, has pulled out of the rerun on grounds that no sufficient reforms were placed on the electoral board that gave Kenyatta a 54% victory. Since then, Kenya's major cities have been engulfed in opposition demonstrations. Pakistan began building a border wall along its frontier with Afghanistan on grounds that the structure will prevent attacks being carried out in the future. Islamabad have already declared that 43 kilometers of the structure in the northern Waziristan region has already been secured. Before building began, there was free, unchecked and unregulated movement of people along 2,300 kilometers of the border between the neighbouring countries. A plague epidemic has already claimed the lives of around 94 people across townships on the island. Fears of the epidemic spreading have been raised due to the alarming cases appearing in urban areas. It's been reported that around 1,153 cases have been identified since the outbreak in August. The World Health Organization has raised the alarm from Geneva, declaring that up to 100,000 people have been given antibiotics over fears that the plague could spread.
What is distinctive this year in Madagascar is that the season of transmission started much earlier, and we have zones that are not usually endemic that were affected. But we also have significant repercussions in the big cities like Tuamasina and like the capital, Antananarivo. Another peculiarity is that we have a higher proportion of pulmonary cases.
We've come to the end of this evening's news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telestirtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I am Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your weekend.